This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm somewhat more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff. All right, today we have Christopher Ramsey on the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. Stephen is not with us today. He decided earlier in the week to run down to the storm that was going to be hitting the Gulf Coast of Tampa to protect his short-term rental. But Chris is a high-level guest. He's part of our inner circle in the capital region of New York, and we're excited to have Chris. Thank you, Chris, for being on. Please tell us about your background and how you got into real estate investing.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. So basically, my family has been in the moving relocation industry for over 100 years. So that eventually led us into warehousing. So that started probably, a long time ago, 50 years ago, let's say. Traditional warehousing, industrial. And then around the 1990s, self-storage became semi-popular. I don't want to say popular, but popular. And so we decided to do one. And then obviously we all know where self-storage is today. It's absolutely blown up. It's gone crazy. Actually, even over the last 5 years, it's gotten really, really popular. And people think that self-storage is something new. But to be honest with you, self-storage has been around for, 50 years, maybe even longer. It's been around forever. But yeah, the moving really helps the self-storage. When people move, they get storage units. That's a typical time they do it. So we leverage the moving company to fill our storage units. Obviously, some other things in storage that we're looking for, prime location, stuff like that. But the moving really helps. And me personally, I started buying duplexes in the capital region area. I think I bought my first one when I was about 15. So I got into actually apartments a long time ago. Not a long time, but 17 years ago. And it built up a portfolio of apartments. So the main places that I'm in are apartments, industrial, and self-storage is actually a class of industrial, I would say. So self-storage.
Very interesting. Seeing how your family was in the moving business, I can see how that ties into the self-storage. Geez, it seems like it's an opportunity that is just there waiting for you. And as we all know, with any asset class in real estate, location, doesn't matter if it's multifamily or your self-storage business. One thing I just caught there that I didn't know about you, or I think it's very, very unique. I thought I got in young, being in the restaurant business, not knowing what I was going to do with my life as sitting there as a cook making $6 an hour. So I bought my first two family at 21. How did you buy a duplex at 15 years old? I don't even know if we can get a loan from a bank until you're 18.
I was able to get a loan. It never made sense to me because the duplexes back then were going for like $40,000, $50,000, and in decent areas. They weren't like completely bad areas. They weren't great areas either, but they weren't bad, right? So I would always look at it like, I wonder why everybody isn't buying these. They're $40,000. I put down 20%, and then literally the next day after I closed, I would go and rent the apartments for $750 each, right? Plus security. So I take back $3,000 when I only put in, 10. So it really never made sense to me. And I still hold a lot of them today. I have over 150 apartments, a lot of them being two families. I still hold most of them. And obviously rents have gone crazy. But even back then they were $750. So it really never made sense to me why everybody wasn't doing it, when at the end of the day, I was almost like I was putting down $5,000 when I went and got security and first month's rent the next day. Yeah.
Amazing. And I always thought the same thing after buying our first 2 families simply on the multiple listing service. They were good buys. Real estate does its thing over time, great locations, but didn't cash flow that great. Then I continued my education, found out about foreclosures, distressed property, stuff like that. And that was mind blowing to me, going to auctions and even just on the MLS, plucking properties that needed work, buy something for 50, put 20,000 into it, and it's worth 100. Rent it out, it cash flows, put it in your portfolio, and repeat. And at a young age, I always said that same thing where I'm like, why isn't everybody doing this? But I figured out, especially getting older, you can't assume the public is looking at things from the same lens you do. That is super naive. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different perception of reality depending on their journey. So I appreciate that similarity there. But at 21 years old, and myself and my best friend at the time buying 2 families, were renting these apartments, and we were younger or as young as our tenants. You're 15 years old. What was some of those experiences where you're renting your apartments to people when you just bought that property at 15 years old?
I actually rented to people that I knew were the first people that I rented to in that first one that I bought.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
In this case, it was a good thing, and I'll tell you why. Because they are still in that house today. Both of them.
You got to be kidding.
Both of them are still in that duplex today. So it turned out to be an absolutely great thing for me. They've been great tenants. They pay every month, so it's absolutely wonderful.
Amazing. Just very, very briefly, let me get into that a bit. So they're people that you knew, I'm assuming friends, and they're still there. Why would they still be in your apartment after so many years?
They like the place. They love the place. They've been there for so long. They've collected so much stuff. It'd be hard for them to move anywhere, right? I'm a good landlord to them. I take care of everything that they need, right? They know me. They're friends with me. So they see no reason to move.
Cool. So you continue to buy the multifamily. I know you mentioned you've been collecting those duplexes. You have about 150 units. Have you made the decision of scaling into larger multifamily?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got some bigger units also that I bought, but at this point, mostly of what I'm doing is self-storage. I've changed into the self-storage completely almost. I will still buy some multifamily here and there, but mostly what I'm doing now is the self-storage. So we have over about 23 facilities right now, and I dedicate most of my time towards that.
Awesome. I know that you had the self-storage and you did do some multifamily. Is it basically, buy when you have that fantastic opportunity with multifamily?
That's exactly
how do
what
you
it is.
Find those deals?
A lot of opportunities arise, especially when you're doing all the social media stuff, when you're well known, obviously. So some opportunities just arise, and obviously I'm pretty good at multifamily, right? Doing it for so long at this point. So if a good opportunity arises, then I end up buying it.
Yeah, right. Who doesn't?
Exactly.
We all do that. Getting into your self-storage, knowing that that's your expertise at this point, what is the dynamic with that? I know that the self-storage probably is maximized and optimized with technology and not having to spend a lot of field time, in-person time, moving people in and doing some of that busy work we have to do in multifamily. Tell us what that looks like for you.
So basically, most of our properties are full, which is great. What we like to do is usually put a manager in there, especially if it's a bigger facility. We put a manager in there um, until it's stabilized, right? And then at that point, we can run it fully virtually, or at least, cut back the employee and run it mostly virtually. So you have the people right online, right? Um, they get their unit number, they move in, they put their own lock on the unit. Um, it's actually pretty much that simple, right? So that's really where we've been heading, and obviously COVID sped that up, where a lot of the places are going fully virtual, right? No one wants to talk to anybody. They go online, they pick their unit, and then boom, click, and that's it. So, um, yeah, that's really the main thing with the self storage is cutting costs, right? Cutting expenses. Um, they're super hard to find and buy, right? So everybody's buying them at, at low cap rates, right? And trying to underwrite the expenses as low as possible. So yeah, you have to account for all that stuff.
Yeah, so tell us about the differences. I know that self storage is much more efficient because you don't have the repair and maintenance and a lot of the in person management, things like that. Compared to your multi-family, what are the cap rates where you're buying your multifamily, or what your multifamily is worth? Because I know you do get great deals. What are the differences in those two asset classes with the cap
I think the
rates?
cap rates are actually pretty similar, especially when you're talking about bigger multifamily units, 20 units and over, and self storage. They're going to be pretty similar. Self storage is the exact same thing, where the bigger the facility, the more it's worth, right? So the cap rate might go down if you're talking over 150 units. Um, so they're actually very similar at this point. The differences in actual operation, you don't have to deal with the people, right? So you got to think in apartments, people are there every single day. They're nitpicking everything. It's much more personal. With storage units, they pay their $100 a month. They don't even know who the owner of the self storage is. To be honest, they're not calling you. It's actually self storage. So that's the big difference, really. Um, and some of the risk factors, right? No one knows what's going on. COVID was a terrible period for evictions and things like that, and people not paying. So that's another huge dynamic for me actually. Um, with buying multifamily, there's just a lot of risk factors. We're in New York. It's tough. Everything's against the landlords, and you don't know what's going to happen really. Evictions take so long, and the big thing is even during COVID, evictions, overlocked units, whatever you want to call it, um, it didn't apply to self storage. So we went on with business as usual, right? If you didn't pay, we got rid of your stuff. So, um, and I understand, right? Because judges and other people, they look at self storage as business to business, whereas everybody looks at you as a landlord as a bad guy, and it's business to personal, right? Or business to consumer. It's B2C, right? So you know I think with the risk factors, you got to be really careful in multifamily, especially in New York, California, states like that.
No, I can see that big difference on your appetite in New York. We talk about that fairly regularly, especially over the last 5 years, more particularly since COVID with evictions and stuff like that. But in self storage, even in New York, someone doesn't pay their rent in 30 days, you're just throwing that lock on there and taking back that unit.
Yeah, absolutely. It does take a little bit of time, month and a half, but you're able to get rid of them pretty easily. And I think the reason why is it's looked at to like a B2B transaction, right? It's looked at like you don't really,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't your personal living space. You don't have kids here. You don't have your dog here. So it's just looked at a little bit different. It's looked at the same in industrial real estate, right? If somebody doesn't pay in an industrial warehouse that's 50,000 square feet and you go in front of a judge, that judge has no remorse. They have no remorse for that tenant that's not paying. This is a business to business transaction. You got this guy's 50,000 square foot warehouse and you haven't been paying on it? Like, no. Like, the judge is on your side in this case, right? So it's looked at a lot more like that, which is obviously what I like.
Boy, is that interesting. And it makes, I'm immediately comparing it to apartments and when we're in court, wondering what's going through the judge's mind. Because I like to be, I'd like to think a very common sense, practical type person. And you have to be super respectful in courts where you want to say, okay, we laid out the facts. This person owes, especially in COVID, this person owes $25,000. And you know our position, you know their position, but then they talk like they're trying to be compromising and work through this where you just want to start screaming, what are you even thinking? But judges on the business to business, you're like, all right, this guy makes sense. But in a landlord tenant situation, they're almost protecting this. I guess in New York, they just don't want to displace residents. What is your experience been with the residential tenants during COVID?
So I actually got fairly lucky during COVID with the residential tenants. I didn't have many that didn't pay, knock on wood, but yeah, it hasn't been terrible. But I will say that there are a couple tenants that got me for, actually that $25,000 mark there is not far off. So I had one that's gone. He's been to court 4 times, and obviously every time it's been pushed off, right?
Sounds like an expert.
He's an expert, right?
Resident.
Yeah, he's an expert, and
yeah.
the judges just look at it different. They look at it, they say, "Oh, I don't know. Like maybe we should just give him another month. Maybe let's just give him a little bit more time and see what he can come up with." And I'm like, he owes 25,000. He's not coming up with that. Like it's not like that's not happening. Yeah, so it's just tough. It's and I know you've probably talked about it, but it's crazy that even happened. And this is coming from a person that I used to do all my own evictions. So I've done literally over probably 100 evictions because I've been doing them forever, obviously, for a long time. And I used to do them myself. You can't do them yourself anymore because if you're an LLC, they don't allow it. Or I don't even know if it's an actual law. They just don't like it. But I used to do them all myself. They used to go pretty smooth, honestly. So it's got worse and worse. And here we are today where it takes, 3, 4, 5 times to get them out. And that's just, it's terrible. It's looked at different. And the judges have complete control. There is nobody else. Like they have complete control. So if they feel a little emotional, if the tenant pulls on their heartstrings a little bit, they have complete control on it. There's really no other way to put it. But yeah, that's what I love about the B2B. It's just makes it a lot easier. They have no feelings towards it, and they usually side with you.
Yeah, it gets to those. You can only control what you can control. Where on the B2B, you have that control. There's not a lot that's gonna mess that up for you. Where on the tenant landlord side, geez, we can't control that uncontrollable aspect of the courts. And yes, I experienced that same thing early on where I did all of my evictions also. And then I believe it is a law. I can't remember how many years ago. It's been so long. We're in New York State and it's very litigious. And the special interest is the trial lawyer association or lobby, whatever you want to say. And they made a law at some point saying if you have a business entity in New York who owns that real estate, you have to have an attorney to represent you in court. So ultimately, it just creates business for attorneys.
Absolutely.
And that was very frustrating. It's funny. I don't know your entire experience. Feel to jump in with this, but I used to. It always frustrated me. So the inner cities, they would cross reference. I'd go to court, and I would have my LLC. versus tenant, and they always checked. Or let me put it this way: I had a few properties I didn't have in an LLC, so it would be William Hamill versus tenant. But if I had that in an LLC, they would cross-reference to make sure that the property was William Hamill. If it was an LLC, they'd say, hey, before we even start this, there's a problem with the papers. You have this as an LLC.
Oh, yeah.
You're listing the documents as William Hamill. We're throwing that out, where I would be able to go to some of the towns, because I always kind of played this because I just didn't want to have an attorney when I didn't need one, and use my name as the petitioner, even though it wasn't an LLC. They didn't cross-reference it, so I was able to get away with that. The tenants didn't know any better, so a guy that liked to try to do everything himself and save a $500 attorney bill, I was able to do those evictions on my own. What did you do any of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just put your own name down instead of the LLC versus the tenant, of course. They eventually, even when the law first started, if it actually is a law, I'm not even sure, but even when they first started it, they let me get away with it probably for another year, where I was still doing my own evictions. And they would say, next time, just bring a lawyer. And I'd be like, yeah, okay. And I'd be like, sure. But then eventually it was just like you're saying, if you came in without a lawyer, they would just immediately be like, where's your lawyer? Throw this case out.
Well, there you go, people. Anybody who finds value in that, where if you want a little loophole on how you can get around having to pay that attorney, or in this case, sometimes, attorneys are so darn busy, backed up still with COVID evictions. It's become more challenging to even get an attorney to be able to get them on their calendar. But getting back to your original learning curve with the family business, the moving business, warehousing, stuff like that, and how that ties into self-storage. Out of college, did you have a W-2 job, or did you go right into the family business? And did your family also invest in the self-storage at that point?
So my whole family was involved in the self-storage. We were investing in it. We started with crated storage. Which you ever seen crated storage? It's basically, think about it as a big industrial warehouse with wooden crates inside of it. And we were filling them up like wildfire, right? So we would fill them up very easily. We would use forklifts, stack them 3-4 high in our industrial warehouses. And then we started saying, wow, self-storage is a lot easier than crated storage and warehouses and people and dealing with wooden crates. So that's how we started into the actual self-storage. When I got out of college, I started a tech company that's involved with the moving and relocation, where you scan your house and it'll tell you a price for the moving. Basically, you scan your house with your phone, and you can get a quote like that instead of sending a salesman out to the house. When I got out of college, I was actually doing sales for the moving company, and I said, why do I have to drive 50 miles to go see this guy's house when we can just do it over the phone? And then, originally I was like, hey, maybe we can just use it for our moving company. And then eventually, after it got developed and everybody wanted to use it, I got the #1 moving company in the world to sign up with us, which is Serva. They're North American and Allied brands. So basically the app is used all over the world now. And heavily involved with the moving and storage. So that was my job, basically, right after I got out of college.
Nice. So you went to college as computer science, I assume. Yep. Getting into your family business with self-storage, and you created this app that I'm assuming was super value to your family business, but you then sold that app to self-storage companies nationwide, worldwide?
Yeah, so moving companies. And basically it's like a SaaS product where they pay like a monthly fee. every month to use it. And so, yeah, most moving companies throughout the world use it. Uh, some iteration of it
Wow.
at this point. Yeah.
Awesome. I love how you certainly leverage your college education into the moving business. Let me ask you, how have you been able to leverage that IT ability with any type of app on the multifamily side?
Nothing on the multifamily side. Tech is very expensive. I look at like the big players in the multifamily software, um, and they may not look that impressive, right? We all know the ones I'm talking about. Um, there's a couple big names in the multifamily software, but there's a lot of money into those softwares. They spent a lot of time and a lot of money. So it's almost like not even worth it to build it for, $150 a month. It's just like you let them take care of it.
Yeah, just like a lot of other things we do in real estate, not only on the purchases, but when we're repositioning or remodeling apartments, it's doing that pro forma, seeing if the cost is worth the reward. So it sounds like on the multifamily side, it doesn't fit that bill.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they have phew, 5, 10, maybe $10 million into those big softwares that you're looking
Yeah.
at. So
Okay, I see there. Excellent. So let me ask you, with other employees in your tech business, and I'm assuming they're tech experts, they've watched your journey, have they seen what you've done on the real estate side, and have they made that shift, investing in real estate as
oh
well?
yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the employees and people around me, basically everybody around me invests in some type of real estate at this point, some type of small multifamily, and I encourage them to really. Um, or they have, I give them opportunities, first dibs to invest with me on some deals that I do,
Awesome.
right? Um, they love the self storage, obviously. When we actually go through with the app, a lot of we know where you're moving to and from, and they see how many people move into self storage units. And most people you don't understand how many people move into self storage units. It's unbelievable. But when they start to see, oh, this guy's moving from 11 Cherry Street into the storage down the road, they start seeing it. It's like, oh my God, literally 1 in 5 people that are moving move into a self storage unit. And then it clicks to them. And then they're like, I have to get into self storage somehow.
Awesome. So they see it while they're doing the
Exactly.
job. They're seeing people move from here to here, connecting those simple dots and saying, real estate is just such a no-brainer to do on the side. And I think a lot of people want to get into real estate. A lot of times they just don't know how. But with your business and your employees and connecting those dots are so simple. And you're making it possible for them to get into some of your deals. Let me ask you about that a little bit. Have you done most of your deals solo? Have you done joint ventures? I know your employees have gotten in on some of them. Have you done any syndication or plan
Yep.
on
So
it?
basically, me and my family own most of the self storages. We did do our first syndication. It's in the process right now. It's a new construction build, which we do all the GCing. Um, and yeah, we have some other partners, little partners in some of the projects, but mostly wholly owned. Um, and yeah, like I said, our goal is my goal especially is just to expand the self storage. Um, up and down the East Coast. We actually got our first one in Florida not too long ago, in West Palm. So, we're kind of doing it the opposite way. We're going from New York and then Florida and then hopefully up the East Coast, right? So yeah, the goal is to just, take on partners if we have to, syndicate if we have to, basically do anything we can to scale the self storage, and we're going to leverage the moving to fill those storage units, right? Which I've hoped, I'd like to think that I'm probably one of the best, if not the best in the world at, because of all my moving background in the app, right? I have a big advantage in filling these storage units.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Very, very impressive. Hey, we started in New York. It's our backyard. We're experts here. So it only makes sense that we started here and then, start making our way into better opportunities or locations that allow us, some more opportunity. I certainly see that similarity. I invested in multifamily in New York so many years, but saw areas of Florida and Tennessee that presented fantastic opportunity. So I'm taking advantage of that
Yeah.
as well. What is your seeing that you're getting into other deals, being in IT and done what you've done? Do you have some type of a software that you use, checking demographics, seeing what that next best location is for your self-storage?
Yeah, so the biggest thing in self-storage is going to be traffic count and population. It's really not that difficult. If you're looking at those things and you're getting prime locations, and in our eyes, we're trying to get prime locations. And if you get those prime locations that have a decent population, good traffic count, your marketing budget can be very little, right? You don't have to do much marketing. So that's really what we shoot for. We're really shooting for the best locations, and we can do a lot of things, right? If we build, we convert, and we buy, so acquire. So we do all three phases of self-storage, right? We can build from scratch, we can convert an old industrial warehouse, or we'll acquire. So we really have all options on the table when looking for prime locations. Most other people, they probably only do one or two at max of the three ways to get into self-storage, right? There's a lot of people that aren't building new, a lot of people that aren't converting warehouses, right? Everybody wants to acquire, but it gives us an advantage that we do all three well, and we can position ourselves in the best locations by doing one of those three.
I love that, vertically integrated. I'm hitting all the different angles there. How long have you been doing ground up?
So actually, the first one that we've ever built in I believe it was 1996 was ground up.
Oh, yeah. Man, so you're a young kid with ground up there. So you have that construction experience as well. So were you a GC at that point, or did you learn from a GC on that,
it all,
or
so. We still GC all the projects that we do, no matter what they are. If it's a new build or a conversion, we're the GC on all of those.
Amazing. So another skill set that you learned very young, where you probably dealt with getting your entitlements from the municipalities, right through breaking ground with subcontractors and watching that and managing that entire process.
It actually is funny that you say that. That's one thing that's gotten harder, obviously, over the years. The approvals, the entitlements are just so hard to get these days. So, it can take years, right, to get approvals.
Is it municipality by municipality in New York? Or?
So, everyone could be different. So, some take longer, some are obviously easier, but, that's gotten really hard. So we like to also buy them with entitlement, right, with the approvals to build. That's a great situation because, again, a lot of people aren't building them. So if we can buy them, with entitlement, that's a huge value add for us and saves a lot of time. I feel like people don't actually add that in when they're thinking, they're pro forma and they're doing all their numbers. How much time is this actually going to take me? But yeah, after the 2 years when it's done, it's going to be worth X amount. But yeah, it's the 2 years, right? And that's why a lot of people just acquire because they know how long everything takes and, the variables involved in building and converting, right? So if you're not factoring in time, it's really tough. And I talk about that a lot because people just look at the numbers and they put no value on a year or two that it's going to take.
Well, and we like instant gratification too. We want to buy something, cash flow immediately, or if it's not going to cash flow immediately, we know that we can get that repositioning happening and see that growth and cash flow happening in a short period of time.
Absolutely.
And that's where that conveyor belt theory comes in, where if you've been doing it for a while and you have a portfolio of assets, you can have that patience and wait 2 years because you have performing assets already, or you're working on something else as you're waiting for that 2 year process to take. That was frustrating for me early on, and I've avoided it. Is looking for permission from a municipality to execute my business plan. It was on a small thing. I bought a single family house, which I thought was a two family, up in Ballston Spa, and I was left having to get permission to have two family zoning. So I had this row of 8 people basically listening to my proposal on why it should be a two family home. And I was successful, but I did not enjoy that
No,
process.
it's a terrible process.
And since I've avoided it because of that, it's one of those uncontrollables. I didn't have control. They could have just told me no. Do you have any tips for people through that process when we have boards making these decisions that really affect our business plan?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to tell them all the positives, right? Especially in self-storage. One of the big things that all these town boards want to say, especially if you're putting in apartments, is they want to tell you that, oh, there's going to be so much more traffic and there's going to be so much more people here, right? You get all these town board people that come and they fight against you because you're trying to put up a 100, 150, 200 unit apartment building. And they're right. It is going to add a lot more traffic, right? The key in self-storage is this is going to add no traffic, guys. There's going to be no one here. It's going to be great. You're not even going to notice it. There's going to be no problems. There'll be one person that comes a day to get their stuff out of it. You're going to really love it. I mean, and if you shoot us down, then there's probably going to be an apartment building here or a gas station. And do you really want that? Do you want 300 people here?
Wow, I love this. So now you're using great sales techniques. You're loading them up with the benefits. They're going to benefit the town. And then you're hitting them with the pain points. If you don't give me permission, you're going to get this. Was it that simple for you right off the bat, or did you learn sales techniques?
You learn some stuff as you go through the process, right? And you learn what the town boards are looking for and what they're worried about. I mean, you got to remember, these people live on these roads. They live close, right? And the main thing that they really don't want is they don't want a ton more people. They don't want a ton more traffic. I mean, that's always really the reason why, things get shot down. So yeah, you learn these things as you go through, but it's still hard, right? It's still tough to get it. And it's an annoying process, to be honest with you. Annoying, tough process. But, it's definitely worth it in a lot of cases. If you can get a piece of land for the right price, you get the entitlement on it and you build them in self-storage and you have the ability to fill them. I mean, obviously that's a big part of this. There's a lot of money to be made in new builds. The thing that we really love and we've been doing lately is these conversions, right? If you can go and buy a big warehouse, right, that the town doesn't like anyway because it's not being used. Let's say there's a 60,000 square foot warehouse that's, no one's buying, it's old, you can get it way below replacement value. Then you go into that building and you add storage units to it. The towns love you, right? You just took that old 60,000 square foot building that no one else could do anything with, and you turned it into something that's, making them tax revenue, that's employing some people. They really love you. The towns love that. So we're not having many problems with getting, approvals, variances, permits for any type of conversions. And there's also a ton of money to be made in that, right? Because if you can get 60,000 square feet for way less than replacement value, put the units in, fill them, I would say that's probably the most profitable play in self-storage.
No, I love that. The huge value add, doing those conversions. What does it look like, through the financing process on something like that? Is it similar to the multifamily where, they're looking at what you have, which may be something that is distressed and vacant and not performing at all, and then you have to show them your pro forma and your business plan.
Yeah, I mean, for us,
How
it's
does that
obviously
look?
a little bit easier. We've done it a lot of times, right? So we're just going to
Yeah.
go and get a construction loan. Show what revenue it's going to make after we do it, and they're confident that we're going to be able to fill the units. Um, but I mean, I would say that conversions are still relatively new in self storage, um, and it's really like it's hidden. It's a hidden secret. So, if you're able to do it, one perfect example is the old Kmart's, right? There was a ton of old Kmart's that were in great locations that went out of business. Perfect self storage conversions. They were a flat box, right? That was very easy to convert. Like, this isn't rocket science converting these things, you know. So and they're still around. I still see old Kmart's all the time that come up for sale, um, and sometimes we buy them and convert them. But yeah, those are home runs, right? Bingo halls, roller skating rinks, um, anything that you would say is on a main road, that are just big boxes, right? Car dealerships sometimes that go out of business are usually in great spots. And, if a car dealership moves out of them, there's not many other things that can go in there besides another car dealership, right? So a lot of that times those things sit vacant. And like I said, the cities love you, the towns love you when you go in and take these properties, right? You're not going to have many problems because you're not doing anything on the outside, right? I'm taking an existing building and I'm only changing the inside. I'm changing nothing about the exterior besides cleaning it up, making it better. Um, so that saves you a lot of time with the towns and a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I can picture these. So all on one level, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 square feet or whatever. Big overhead doors around the side or the
Oh yeah,
back. And you're able to just take this empty canvas, utilize those big access points with the huge overhead doors, and then you're just fitting up storage units within.
yeah, absolutely. It sounds simple because it is, but a lot of people are
Awesome.
scared of those big buildings. They are big projects, right? It's not going to be something that you just jump into, but if you can figure it out, it's very profitable.
Yeah, there's a nice Kmart in Clifton Park. Geez, prime location that's been sitting there, for years. Talking to people are talking about apartments and everything else, and it just sits in a prime plaza. So I can see the value there. Is that something that you currently aggressively looking for those types of
Oh yeah,
opportunities?
absolutely. We're aggressively looking for all three: new construction, conversions, or acquisitions. So, um, like I said, the only real reason why we're taking on investors is to scale, right? Is to move faster, right? Otherwise, we would just do it ourselves. But if you really want to scale, you have to, right? So you're stronger together. So yeah, if any opportunity presents itself, we're willing to do all three.
Yeah, and you love the game. Game is getting these deals done and utilizing your expertise to get into these different asset classes. No, that your journey is amazing. I love how it started at 15 years old. You are on the Collecting Real Estate show, so we like to wrap this up with a collection of questions for you. They say you have to have three of something to make a collection. So, three questions to wrap this up. Number one, what is the most important thing you've learned since collecting real estate in 5 words or less?
Buy in prime areas.
Location, location, location. We all agree with that. Number two, shifting completely. What are your 1 to 2 year personal goals?
To have 100 self-storage facilities.
Well, that's business. What about
Oh,
personal?
personal? to have 100 self-storage facilities. I'm not very exciting outside of business.
You're falling into that stereotypical IT
Oh yeah,
guy.
yep. I am that guy. Yeah, I don't have not many personal goals. To be honest with you, that is the game. It's if you love doing it, that is like my personal self. I love doing it, so it's not even like work to me. It's not business. Like it's what I do.
I love that. No, I love that. So you're having fun every day doing what you love to do. Last question for you, Chris, is how can we and the listeners assist you, and how do we contact you?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is Chris Ramsey 60, and my Instagram is the real Chris Ramsey. Those are the two main social medias I'm on right now. So if you want to contact me, if you have any questions, if I can help in any way, again, there's enough self-storage to go around, so I have no problem telling my secrets or helping people out. So yeah, if you want to contact me, those are the best two places.
No, that's awesome. We appreciate that, and yes, we're not in competition with each other. There's plenty to go around for everybody. It's not a zero-sum game, and we are only in competition with ourselves. So please take Chris up on his offer, because this type of stuff, the warehouse experience and self-storage experience, this is in his blood. He is the ultimate expert at this. And he's just rinsing and repeating this process. So, Chris, we really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bill.